skips.
Well, I've been through one before.
All right, good evening. It's 6 o'clock p.m. And yes, Lee Moore cannot make it this evening. He had urgent work matter come up, so we'll continue with who we have here at the dais, which is a quorum. So having said that, we're going to move on to the work session regarding the joint work session with the Utility Advisory Committee as well as the City Council regarding rates, electric rate study, and recommendations and deliberations. So I'm assuming, Gonz, do you have a presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Commissioners. On September last year, the city retained Burns & McDonnell to do a electric rate study. A rate subcommittee was formed that included Dwayne Wallman and Clint Barney. The presentation we have is divided in 3 sections. The first section is a general overview of the rate study. The second one is just a quick view of the electric CIE plan and CIP, and then a rate subcommittee recommendations. I'm not going anywhere. So the first part, the electric rate study overview, will be done by Ted Kelly. He's with Burns & McDonnell.
How you doing, Ted?
Good evening. Ted Kelly from Burns & McDonnell. Assisting me tonight will be Sarah Ruckman. She'll be going over some of this information for you. What we do want to do tonight is give you the overview of the study that we've completed over the past few months. We've met with your rates committee and discussed our results, and we're coming forward tonight, go through the process that was handled, discuss our financial planning piece, the cost of service analysis, and then provide you the information on proposed rates and typical bill comparisons with those proposed rates. So the process itself to complete a rate study, and you've been through this with other utility systems and with your electric system in the past, and the process really is the similar process. The first step is really completing the financial planning side of things to look at what you're generating revenue from your existing rates compared to what your revenue requirements are from an operating and capital standpoint. And are the current rates sufficient to provide your overall needs moving forward as far as a financial plan? Once that's done, we look at things we go through the cost of service analysis and complete analysis of taking a test year revenue requirement out using functional allocations and units of service by class of customers served, breaking it down and determining under your existing rates what revenues are being generated by those rates by class, and compare that to the cost to serve those different classes. And say, are things relatively sufficient overall, and are things by class where they should be? And then based on that, using that as a guideline, we come up with proposed rates for the classes. So that's what we want to talk about tonight. First, I want to have Sarah talk about the financial planning piece.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Ruckman, and I'm just going to go over the financial planning portion of this, and then I'll pass it back to Ted. So just to go over some of the core assumptions that we considered throughout the forecast. So for our customer and usage forecast, we looked at historical customer growth, and we forecast at less than 1% for customer growth in the future. Sorry. For your operation and maintenance expenses, we used 2018 as the budget that was given to us by the utility, and then from there on the out years we used 3% inflation. For power supply costs, we got this from KMEA, and this does include transmission costs. On the capital improvement side, this was also given to us by Gardner, and it's a 5-year capital plan. And then our rate classification revisions, and Ted will go into this in more detail later on, but we are proposing to eliminate the all-electric classes and to just have standard classes for residential, commercial, and so forth. So looking at the revenues and expenses, your revenues versus the revenue requirements for the forecast period, the blue vertical line, or blue vertical bars there are your operation and maintenance expenses. The red are your other expenses. Purple is capital improvement plan, and then green is your debt service. And the horizontal black line going across, those are your revenues that we have forecasted out coming in. And so our key findings that we concluded from the financial portion of this is that looking at, I'll go back just so you can see as I'm going through these, that for 2019 there is no overall rate adjustment that is needed. So we are proposing revenue neutral rate adjustments to the rates for 2019. And then we are proposing that in 2021 that you revisit and see where your expenses and revenues are at and see what kind of adjustments might need to be made. But again, at this point, we are not proposing a rate increase. And just some of the risks that come with looking at the forecast going forward, if there's a difference in or changes in your customer usage, or if you lose large customer accounts going forward, there could be unanticipated capital needs of capital projects that come up that have not been discussed at this point, and if your power supply costs increase in the future that we've not accounted for at this point. And those are just some of the risks that could come into play for changing what our forecast is looking like at this moment. So, and I'll give this back to Ted to go on.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So we'll talk a little bit about cost of service analysis. Once we looked at things on an overall perspective, as Sarah said, your current revenues are sufficient to meet your requirements. So there's no need for an overall adjustment. So then we wanted to look at things by class, and that's the cost of service analysis. So we unbundled that revenue requirement. It's broken up into the pieces for power supply, which includes your demanded energy costs, your transmission costs for the system, the distribution costs, and then customer service costs. And using those unbundled requirements, we assign costs to the classes based on the allocation factors, which are associated with the cost to serve those classes and the equipment that's used to serve different customer classes. And then we summarize those results. And what we found is the current cost recovery by class is fairly reasonable. So there's not a lot of subsidy going on, but there's a little bit of shift that is potentially available there. The adjustments by class would be made they're appropriate to address the equitability issue by class. Commercial classes have been one of the things that we did do at the request of Gons and Amy was looked at the commercial class and redefine those into small, medium, and large to kind of address how your commercial classes really are falling out now. And then we did want to eliminate the all-electric rates. And the reason for doing that is your underlying power supply cost. There's no real difference between season like there might have been at one time. Things have changed, and your costs by season are pretty much the same. And when Sarah mentioned the potential, one of the things now is in the market, favorable power supply costs are out there. That's something, though, that we caution, because if there were a change, a lot of the market's being driven by gas costs today. If there were a big spike in gas prices, that cost could adjust quickly. So it's just something we always want to make sure we keep in mind. But when we look at cost of service results for the combined classes, residential and commercial classes, large commercial and commercial demand, we have a municipal class and the school district. And so all of those, you can see that from a residential perspective, residential is more than providing for their revenue requirement under the existing charges. So there's potential for a slight decrease in the residential class. Then the commercial classes, the no demand customers and the large commercial, they need a slight increase, and then commercial demand's pretty much meeting their requirements. Municipal overall could use some adjustment, and the school district could use a slight adjustment. And when we say that, then what we needed to do with those results was look at your actual rates, and then how can those be adjusted? And that's what this part is going to talk about. Our existing rates for residential, you have an energy charge and a service charge. And what we're proposing, that existing all-electric rate would go away, and you would just have a standard residential rate. And the proposed rate would go the energy charge there, it's at 1082. We would lower that to 1038, and the service charge would stay the same. And what that net result does for the average customers, we wanted to show you existing bills for a low-use customer, an average-use customer, and a high-use customer. And under each case, they're seeing about a 2% reduction to their bill. So there's a savings across the board for the residential class. When we look at the school district, the existing rates now, it's a tiered system so that the first 800 kilowatt hours are at 5.36 cents. The next 800 plus are at 3.74. The demand charge is $12.22 and a service charge of $11.13 on a monthly basis. So what we're proposing to do is change that energy charge and no longer have that block. Doesn't make sense to have that. So the energy charge is in between the two current rates. Your demand charge and service charge would stay the same. But depending upon the level of usage, the increase on the school district is anywhere from 1% to about 2% overall to their bill. When we look at interdepartmental rates, the current energy charge is 8.55 cents. What we're proposing there is we're looking at, because you have low-use customers and then very high-use customers, we're trying to set a rate where the energy charge would be lowered slightly. So if it's a low use, they would see a decrease to the bill, but if it's high use, they would see an increase on their bill. There's such a discrepancy between the level of usage with your interdepartmental customers, the different buildings are being served on a municipal basis. And what's particularly important, the high use is your water plant, your sewer plant. So if we raise the rate too much, it's going to have a significant impact. And I know you've already gone through the process of looking at your water and sewer rates. So we're trying to keep that in mind. Then on the commercial side, here's your existing rates for commercial, the different commercial classes. What we're proposing for the commercial side is the small, medium, and large, where you have the energy charges for the small is set at 7.86 cents, the demand charge at $5, and the service charge at $10. The medium class has a slightly lower energy charge of 6.45 cents. The demand charge is slightly higher, $9.75 per kW. The service charge is $20. And then for the large commercial class, the energy charge is 5.4 cents with a $14.50 demand charge and $35 service charge. So with those proposed rates, this is kind of a summary of where those are. You can see the residential sees about a 2% decrease, school district 2% increase. Interdepartmental overall stays pretty much the same. And then small, medium, and large commercial, we're just showing the proposed rates because those are not compared to the existing charges because you had the different classifications and we're changing those classifications. What that means, looking at residential rate comparisons, currently for an average bill of 1,000 kilowatt hours, the existing customers are paying about $113 a month, and that would go down to $110.50. How does that stack up? You're on the low end of things compared to some of the other communities in Kansas. And you can see that. A lot of people's rates are a little bit higher than what yours are for residential customers. This kind of puts that same information just in a bar graph and shows where you are existing, and we're actually bringing you down just slightly. We got the source of that information was from APPA to get the information for other municipal systems in Kansas. So that's how we compared things. So with that, I would open up to questions you might have of me, or Amy, did you need to come up first? Whatever you prefer.
Thank you, Ted. Electric CIE plan, as you may know, in 2017, the master plan was revised. It was done internally, and the projects identified were incorporated in the CIE. Some of the projects that were included as part of the rate study was the West Star interconnection. The project is to have a second source of power connected to sub number 3. The smart meters, that's for this year and next year. The T-line loop feed right now, sub 3 is being fed by sub 2. The idea is to have a second feed from sub 1 and the gas turbine control upgrade in 2022. Now the projects were, yes, that I just mentioned for the as part of CIP. If we look at the 10-year, we have an additional $1.6 million in 2025 and a big $30 million in 2028. The $30 million is to replace existing gas turbines or buy additional capacity. So the total expenditure for the next 10 years is about $38.44 million. And with that, I'll pass it to Amy.
Okay, good evening. So I've tried to cut this way shorter than the water and wastewater, so, but, oh.
Lowering rates.
Yeah, maybe that's it. So we met as the rate subcommittee, Dwayne Waldman, Clint Barney, and then we also took it to the UAC, who voted on the recommendations to bring them forward. And so to do the rate adjustments, we are proposing that these would go into effect in 2020, that we would do a conservation campaign for the city as a whole, but also communication with our commercial customers because of the way that their billing rate design looks, that we would explain that to them so they understood what they were seeing, how, if it would be an impact, that would be an increase, maybe ways to conserve, to manage their demand, since all customers will be being billed demand. And so a communication practice with them during this period through 2019. The forecast also assumes a 1% electric growth rate, a 3% increase in cost of service, maintains a 25% fund balance of total expenditures, and remains revenue neutral through just adjustments through the classes. And the forecast is through 2023, but it is recommended that we review the position in 2021. So with that, the rate class of customers that were selected would be residential, commercial divided into small, medium, and large, the school district, and interdepartmental. That removes, like Ted said, the residential with electric heat, commercial with electric heat, commercial without demand, commercial with demand, large commercial, and residential and commercial electric heat with separate meters. And I just wanted to state, from the work session, it came out that there could potentially be a 66% rate increase for commercial customers. That is not true. That was not proposed. Our commercial with electric heat customers, the rate study actually showed that they would need a 66% rate increase to cover their cost of service. So instead of keeping those classes, we absorbed them into the small, medium, and large. It was a total of 20 customers that we did absorb into those classes so that we would not impact them quite like that. So. Yeah, well, incorrect. And we also use the term all electric. So when we're talking all electric, that also means the residents with electric heat and commercial with electric heat. It is one and the same. And so terminology kind of sometimes might get lost with us because it means something where maybe that word didn't mean a lot and maybe we scratched it out. And so, but they are one and the same to us. So all electric means you have electric heat. So with that, the next committee recommendation is the commercial class design. And we did go with the industry standard and looked at our customer base and how they divide it out. So our small will be less than or equal to 25 kW. Medium greater than 25 and less than 200 kilowatts, and then large will be greater than 200 kilowatts. So All commercial customers will be billed demand, which will be new. They won't be choosing a rate that may not have a demand. It helps us to promote energy conservation, and all of our meters have already been changed out to read demand. So, the suggested rate adjustments. Residential, 2% rate reduction. USD 231, it comes to a 2% rate increase. Interdepartmental rate adjustments vary depending on the previous rate class. And so to speak on that a little bit, some of our interdepartmental were actually being billed at the commercial all-electric rate because it actually was cheaper than the interdepartmental. So the impact across the board in those stages has varied what they were actually being billed. And so that rate is now more in line with a wholesale. For commercial, the proposed rate adjustment is based on the proposed commercial rate class design. I will say a lot of our small businesses, when we looked at them individually, they will actually see a rate reduction as well on the new rate class. And so we did just a quick impact based on size so that you can kind of see, depending on each one, where they would fall, because it does vary so much what that dollar amount impact would be based on your usage. So a lot of people like to look at that on their own basis so that they can see what their bill will look like. And so I won't read that to you if you guys have any questions on that, or we can come back to that. So that's residential, all seeing a discount. USD, the impact, depending on the size of the school, the facility varies. The largest one is their large school, and that impact is $185.47 per month. Interdepartmental rate impact for our small users, it will be a decrease, but for our large users, it will be an increase. And so it comes across the board, and it puts them all on that same rate class back to that. So that's where a lot of the variance comes from.
Where would the new Justice Center fall into this classification?
I am guessing based on what the historical data is, they will fall into the interdepartmental large. They don't have gas service, so they are going to have electric heat, and so automatically that's going to push up their demand, I feel. So I'm guessing that it will be based on the size of service, that it will fall into the large category.
They've had a much smaller space versus the new 33,000
Yeah.
square foot that they've got. So, okay.
Yeah, and so I think that too, that it's, even though they're not open 24/7, somebody's operating 24/7 out of that building. So never will it not have a light on, and so, or equipment plugged in, lots of equipment. So I envision that they're going to fall onto the large side.
Thank you.
Commercial rate impact, again, this one varied so much across the board based on the rate structures of where they were at and what their usage was. Again, small. A lot of them you see that they're going to see a decrease. Medium commercial, 186.02 was the impact for the average. And how I came up with an average for them was I actually took every commercial customer, a year's worth of their usage, and divided it out to come up with what an average customer in that rate class looks like, to come up with those numbers there for the usage kilowatt hours. Okay, and want to keep that short to open up for questions. And
Great, thanks, Amy. Appreciate
okay.
it. So I think this is the time for open discussion. We have all the data before us. We obviously have members of the race subcommittee here joining us for this discussion. I'm going to start, just for brevity's sake, I'm going to start on the right with Mr. Baldwin. I'm sure that you have several questions.
Well, first, I think since everybody else done the presentation, it'd be good to let the commissioners, if they have anything to say.
Absolutely.
Say what they want to say.
I want to thank, first off, Burns and Mac did an excellent job, worked with us several times. Ted and Sarah did everything we asked and more. I guess.
Oh, make sure to speak into the microphone if you could, please. Sorry, and you'll have to press the button to start it. Yeah. You have to hold it down, sorry.
I gotta hold it down.
Yeah,
I was thinking Burns and Mac.
Yeah.
So anyway, for the, I guess, I don't have any statements per se. I'll wait to hear you guys' questions, and then if I may make statements after your questions.
Okay.
I would also have to say very much appreciative of Burns and Mac putting in the time and effort. And additionally, I would just say that I know there was concern about reducing the number of classification levels, but I do believe that that is the correct method going forward. You're simplifying the processes for city operations, simplifying the processes for new businesses coming in. And so I know that quite a few people have been coming up to me, talking to me on the street and in other various locations, but I do think that moving forward, that's probably going to be one of the best, decisions we could have made.
Okay, my comments.
Yes.
So I am ecstatic to see the declining block eliminated. I tested that the entire time I was on the UAC. I'm glad to see smart meters coming soon because I'd like to see how that changes, impacts across O&M. I think simplifying the classification to echo is ideal, and I'm glad that in the process of decoupling and putting it back together that we didn't see any large spikes, and where they did, you guys did a good job of absorbing that, so nobody saw 15% up or down. So I think everybody did a great job so far.
I had a question. If I don't know who, maybe Burns and Mac can answer. Is it like, for instance, some of the other power supply companies, KCP&L and those other ones, do they have a separate rate classification for the school districts? Do you know?
To address that, I mean, do they have separate classifications? I think KCP&L, I'm not sure they have a school rate. I'd have to look. Some communities do, and you have the municipal system, some don't. The fact that you have one is, and we can address the cost of serving those customers is not a bad thing. So,
And I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just, I guess I'd like to point out that we are doing that. So there is.
Yeah, a lot of the municipalities that I do rate work with do have school rates. So we try. I mean, the worst circumstance I had probably was a utility that had 40 rate classifications. We got them to shrink that down to 10 because they had classifications for everything, and the differences between a lot of those classes just aren't there as far as cost of serving them. So you can have too many, but
Sure.
School certainly is not a bad thing to separate out.
Okay.
I would almost think administrative overhead, when you have that many rate classes, almost neutralizes the cost that you might save.
It makes it difficult. And it makes it difficult for your billing system and maintaining all that. So all those things lead to further complications.
Sure. Can we go back to the Burns and Mac slide that has like the price breakdown? And you just keep going back and I'll tell you when to stop. How's that?
That's it.
That one right there.
Okay.
So real quick, can you tell me the difference between the demand charge and the service charge, what that charge is?
The demand is $1 per kW charge,
Uh-huh.
and the service charge is more of a fixed charge to cover some of your customer service costs.
Okay, so that just happens one time in a billing cycle?
Once a month.
Once a month, right,
Mhm.
okay, all right, thank you, that was, and everything else.
Randy?
I would echo what Clint and everybody else said. I appreciate Burns and Mac and staff and their hard work. I also like the streamline. I often wondered why we had so many classifications back in my UB days, but it was what it was at that time. I have one question and one last statement. I also like the school classification because I think it would enable us to key in on that cost and maybe find some savings down the road based on historical data. And it might also enable the school to find some efficiencies within their structure or organization. So I think it's a good thing. The question that I had was about the gas turbines, GONS. So the gas turbines are there now to produce electricity on demand, is that correct?
They are, but since they are inefficient, we can buy the power from the system.
Less than what the
However,
cost?
the gas turbines give us capacity reserves, which is about anywhere between 27 and 30 megawatts.
And do we sell that energy that the gas turbine produces back to the system?
No, we don't sell it. But
Is it
if we need to buy additional energy, we have the capacity, the reserves, to buy the additional energy. In order to buy energy, you need to have some kind of capacity.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have to buy from the market.
Right,
So
okay.
the gas turbine gave us between 27 and 30 megawatts capacity reserve.
I support them, I was just curious. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Okay, so, a couple of questions, really quickly for me. First of all, let's go back to the next slide on this particular presentation.
That one?
I want to make it very clear to folks who might be watching this, who say that our utility rates are sky high and they're so much bigger, greater than every place else around the metro area. I don't know, I defy them to say this when they see this slide.
We should have Danica keep this.
Because when I look at this, and I look at KCP&L Kansas at $134, per monthly bill on a standard residential rate, which is what they're charging Edgerton, and I look at $110.50 with this rate structure, I'm sorry, that's a 30% difference, a variance.
And Mayor, I might add, or piggyback on your good point, that the response from GONS and our utility team is 100 times better than who you're comparing
Well, didn't we
to.
just have a big snowstorm where we had a bunch of trees get knocked down? How much power outages did we have during that period of time?
Several days.
You did, yes,
And
but
I'm
what about in
KCP&L.
Gardner, Kansas?
We only had, most of the outages were related to the trees falling on the cable that feed the meters.
Yes.
There was not a generic outage.
We did not have a grid outage at all.
I had friends in Spring Hill asking if I could do something about getting them power from Gardner, because
Okay.
they weren't able to get it from
So
KCP&L.
we have a robust network. We have high reliability, low service time, and some of the best rates in the Kansas City metro area. In fact, in the entire state of Kansas. So I just want to let the record show here that there should not be any complaints at all regarding our power. Now, some might make complaints, have some valid complaints regarding our water and our wastewater.
Well,
But our electric
I think that's usually what the issue is that
exactly.
they get one bill and they see a total number
Correct.
and they don't realize that electric is as good as it is.
Correct, but I want to focus on electric because this is the one that always comes back. This is the one that always says, well, we're just totally out of whack with the rest of the Kansas City metro area. I think this shows that, yeah, we're out of whack with the Kansas City metro area in the good side, not on the bad side.
And I think we can get into this discussion during council session, but my opinion is that we need to find an opportunity to offset the difference between these great electric rates and the wastewater and water. Because we all know that electric is the revenue center and water and wastewater is our cost center. And I think that we should be able to find some net neutral opportunities to reduce the difference that we're going to see in the outlying years on the water and wastewater side. But again, we can table that for a later date.
I think we're gonna have a vote at some point. I think it's on the evening's agenda on this particular rate structure, and so that handles us for 2019. I think that and moving forward towards 2020, we might want to start thinking about doing some looking at different ways that we might be able to bring down some of those water. And understanding we're looking at rate increases on the water side starting in 2020. So, this decrease for residential is going to be offset by a rate increase with water. So, absolutely, I'd like to be able to. All right, yes, absolutely.
Do you have something on that offset impact or for this presentation, or is that later tonight?
Because it's water, wastewater, and electric, I saved it for the city council meeting.
Great.
So that will be presented with those items.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Pretty sure we were just about
Absolutely. Well, I would also mirror what the rest of the council and the UAC have said regarding the work of Ted, Sarah, the rest of Burns and Mac staff. You guys have really stepped up to the plate and done a good job of bringing some really solid information, really solid recommendations. I love the fact we're streamlining our rate structure. That makes us so much more certain for businesses and other concerns who are coming in and wanting to do business in Gardner. They have a much simpler, much cleaner way to be able to calculate their expenses. So again, thank you for your input. Any other questions? Or you want to weigh in, or? Okay. All right.
The only other thing I could think of would be Mike, since everybody's here, and could you do the presentation now and you can vote later?
Well, that's up to
20
the.
minutes.
That makes sense.
I'm okay with it.
The only thing I have a concern about is that particular presentation's on the agenda,
And then people might not.
and so folks who might want to weigh in, aren't here to hear. So-
Caring about people, I tell you.
Yeah, well, always err on the side of the agenda.
Yeah. At least they can see us now.
No, that's true. And yes, kudos to the tech staff for coming up with
Hey,
that
it's
wonderful
good to see you
solution
out
on
here,
the AV
Charles,
system.
instead of in the closet in the back.
Yeah. All right. Well, without further ado, if we have no other discussion on this particular work session, we're going ahead and give you guys 25 minutes back. Again, thank you very much for the folks at Burns and Mac, and thank you to city staff also for your efforts in this. I personally appreciate all the work you did. So.
And the committee.
And the
Yeah, thank you,
and
commissioners.
Obviously, the UAC has done a tremendous job. So, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, commissioners.
Yeah.